Good morning once again. I'd like to bring your attention to panel number 2. I'd like to introduce you to our moderator of this session on creating wealth. She is the CEO for VentureVerse and Director of Women's Wellness, Denica Gordon-Mendel. Denica works with clients to increase personal effectiveness and improve quality of life. Her combined knowledge in psychology and professional background allows for her unique insights as she supports organizations with organization positioning, internal and external communications, and crisis management. In addition to her psychology degree and work, Denica has also recently launched her own startup in educational technology. We come to this session all understanding what it means to set money aside and how important that is, but then what? Levels of wealth obviously vary across individuals, yet there are fundamentals that apply to us all. During this session, Denica and the panelists will discuss what it means to strive to achieve wealth. With that, I turn it over to Denica.
Let me start by introducing this wonderful woman to my left, Ramraji Fuller, who has worked with law firms and their attorneys on wealth management for over 20 years, currently a director and private banker for the law firm group. Ramraji is responsible for business development and strategy in Orange County and San Diego, and provides guidance on financial wellness, including banking, lending, and investments. Malik Jope is an executive director and vice president of Morgan Stanley, with an extensive background in M&A transactions, strategy development, debt and equity capital raising, risk evaluation and mitigation, as well as financial modeling and forecasting. Mr. Jope has also served as an informal mentor to dozens of younger professionals of color. He is a founding member of Morgan Stanley's first scholarship fund for students at historically Black colleges and universities. And then we have Mr. Maurice Murray, who is joining us via, I'm sure, Skype, right? Isn't that what we all use? Or no, it's Zoom. Okay, Zoom. Who is an executive director and banker with JP Morgan's Private Bank's Orange County office, and with an institutional background and over 20 years of banking experience. Maurice advises affluent families, corporate executives, owners of closely held businesses on a range of personal wealth matters. And I'm going to start with you, Ms. Ramraji. Can you share with our audience how you chose this industry and cultivated your career?
Definitely. And thank you everyone for having me here at this conference. I'm so thrilled. I'm also privileged and humbled to be an executive MBA student here. And it's so, for me, I just appreciate sharing my story, because it's a good story in my opinion. and to jump right in, you know, I grew up in Northern California in San Francisco. Very humbled beginnings with my father being in the hospitality hotel industry for many years as a doorman at a major hotel in San Francisco. And he made sacrifices, him and my mom, to put me into a private school in the city. And from there, I was indeed the only person of color. It was an all-girls school, so we were all women at the time. You know, definitely, I think that experience has shaped my experience in working in the financial services industry, especially here in Orange County, because I've never, I guess growing up, not feeling that you're the only one, because when you're starting off young, growing with a group of students, and you just develop those kind of relationships. And I think that really helped prepare me for this future in the financial services industry. After I went to UCLA, and while I was at UCLA, I needed a job. My father told me I needed to make sure that I start developing some of my own personal financial skills, and I decided to become a teller at Bank of America. And throughout my entire college career, I was a teller and then moved up within the ranks there, becoming a personal banker, and ultimately graduating, being offered a more full-time role. And then it was indeed introductions within Bank of America that afforded me opportunities of exploring different options within the industry, and not just options within what financial institution, but what, where in the banking industry do I and am I feeling most passionate about? And that happens to be wealth management, financial planning. I enjoy being able to help people and their families develop a wealth plan for their future generations. And so a lot of that, as we talk about, is a lot of professional development, but also personal development, similar to the panelists before, a lot of personal branding development and building your network of relationships for people that see your full potential.
Sure. So I kind of sometimes call myself the Forrest Gump of finance. Like, I kind of stumbled in a lot of ways into my career. I went to Morehouse College in Atlanta. And there I went as a marketing major. I wanted to fancy myself to be somewhat creative, but part of kind of my early academic career was forced to take a lot of finance courses, and I happened to excel in those. And some of the upperclassmen that were in those classes that I was in classes with, I actually ended up tutoring them, and they said, hey, we're actually headed off to Wall Street. You should look into that career. I didn't know the first thing about Wall Street. I had two professional parents. My father's a pediatrician, my mom's a teacher, but we never talked about money, never knew anything whatsoever about budgeting or planning or anything like that. Was fortunate enough to have a great internship in New York at JP Morgan. That kind of lit the fire for me to want to stay on Wall Street. Started full time and witnessed a couple of recessions and really interesting times in the market. I'll say that, and have made a career of it. And one thing that I will say that kind of really helped guide me, and it's always helped guide me throughout my career, is networking, but not networking necessarily above, but networking across. Right? What I found is that you have all you need probably in this room or with your colleagues. If these are long-term relationships you're going to end up having. Some of your colleagues, some of your friends are going to end up being your clients, or they're going to be in a position later on to potentially hire you. So I think that's what I found has really been helpful in my career, just networking across, as opposed to always trying to necessarily network up. So I'll stop there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Maurice?
Yeah. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. Very similar to my fellow panelists. I didn't really have the fortune of growing up knowing exactly what it is I wanted to be. Luckily for me, I also attended Morehouse College, and being able to witness people who look just like me come back from a summer internship at Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan gave me hope and gave me confidence that I too could maybe one day land a job in the financial services industry. So when you talk about place, I think Morehouse was the place where I became aware that this is a career that I could find myself doing. And 20 something years later, fortunately, I'm still here, so.
Okay, perfect. Not having guidance or a deeply rooted system of support, and our earlier session talked about this, it can cause feelings of confusion and isolation within the workplace. Identifying mentors, creating that scaffolding, really building that professional network is really important and challenging for Black professionals. Can you share your journey and any guidance? And why don't we start with you, Mr. Lake?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is an area of my career that I wish I had done a much better job of at the outset. My approach was initially to say, all right, I'm just going to put my head down and I'm going to try to impress the people that I work with immediately, right? That's a high risk, high reward maneuver, right? Because you're just in a vacuum, and only a certain few people will have kind of power over your career, even know you, or know what you're doing, right? I was lucky again that it worked out for me, but just seeing knowing what I know now, what I do now, and now as a senior, senior executive at the firm, the amount of time and energy that I put in, and that I can tell people, hey, I know this problem. I know exactly what you're facing. Here's the playbook. Here's some recommendations. I could have saved myself so much time and energy and confusion, and potentially, leaving, or ending my career early, had I just kind of reached out or done that. So I really encourage, and I'm grateful when younger people at the firm or even outside of the firm reach out to me and say, hey, I'm interested in building a career. Like, that's impressive to me. And I want to give as much knowledge and feedback that I can. And sometimes even just to let you vent and let you know, hey, I've been there, I know exactly what that is, like, this too shall pass. Mm-hmm. Don't self-select out. That's one of the things that we tend to do a lot. As when we're kind of the only person in the room, was like, I don't see a future, I don't see anyone who looks like me, I'm out, I'm not gonna do this, I try to encourage people not to do that, until you're really ready, or if, but that's what I see a lot of times, and I try to counsel against. Keep moving forward, it gets better. So that's one area I wish I'd done a lot better, and I hope that I highly recommend kind of building out and reaching out to people, and technology has made that so much more easier to do as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
Ms. Baraji.
Yes, I think that building your own personal network is something that is necessary. Oh, bless you.
Oh, poor guy.
Hang in there, Maurice. We got you. Thanks for not being here, though. I digress.
Yes.
So building your own personal network, I agree, it's a 360 perspective. I wish that I made myself more transparent about wanting for constructive criticism from people around me, those that I look up to from a leadership perspective, because I think there were some unconscious bias about sharing that type of feedback with me, thinking I may overreact or not be as receptive. And so had I, knowing this now, 20 years now, at my current employer, I wish I had been more transparent about saying, hey, look, tell me best practices, what I did right, what I did wrong in a meeting, share some things or thoughts about how I went about approaching a situation. And that's what I try to do right now as well, is just having very transparent conversations, and not from a point of telling someone when I'm receiving that I'm not going to be defensive. I love to hear it. I think we all have to have a self-awareness of being able to be open to that, and that helps to broaden your personal networks into your professional networks.
Can I just say real quickly, one thing to really almost force people to give you that feedback or transparency. Sometimes, people don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. If they say, oh, I think things went really well, you can say, really, I thought I could have been a little more concise. You start the conversation with them, and that's just a little, pro tip to get the feedback conversation going. So, sorry.
That's nice.
Digress,
We like tips.
Yes, absolutely. Aliza.
Maurice?
Yeah, I agree with everything the panelists have said. I tend to think about leveraging professional networks in two levels. I think it's important to have, I call them outlets, folks that are maybe in my peer group or maybe who look like me, whether they're in the same profession or across profession, CPAs, lawyers. I think it's important to have open dialogue and conversations with folks you can just have an outlet and share and relate to. I also feel as though it's important, especially for new people entering the workforce, or even if you're a veteran in the workforce, to have advocates and sponsors, some champions who not only will give you feedback and criticism, I'm gonna call it feedback. People will give you feedback when you ask for it, but those who have insight into your performance. At the end of the day, I think everyone is willing to help those who they work with in some way, shape, or form. We all want to help. But at the end of the day, I think I've tried to focus on my performance, because if I wasn't a top performer, people wouldn't spend the time of day with me. So I've always gone into a new role thinking about how do I become a top performer, but at the same time, reaching out and having those coffees and having those conversations, joining those business resource groups and taking leadership roles, because those are opportunities for people to get to know you on a personal level. And once they know you on a personal level, I think they are willing to open up their network to you. So.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that. I'm going to actually direct this next question first at you, Maurice, and that is, we don't often talk about weathering personal storms or needing perseverance to deal with the many issues that come with building our career and moving into leadership, especially as people of color, directly addressing it, being the only one in the room. Any insight that you could offer?
Yeah, I think there's no doubt about it. You know, there are feelings of isolation and maybe misunderstanding when you are one of or one of few people in the room. I think early on in my career, it was somewhat intimidating for me to have a voice and feel comfortable in that space. Now I feel as though it's really a position of power. I find leverage in being one of the few or one of the only ones in the room. It's a powerful thing. I'll share a really quick story. You know, when I joined JP Morgan Private Bank, my manager, he called me. He said, listen, we don't have any African Americans on the team. We are in Orange County, it's 2020. We need to have African Americans on the team. And it shocked me, to be quite honest. I didn't know if that was a good thing that he was saying that or a bad thing. But I really had to take a step back and tell myself, you know what, this is an opportunity for leverage, and I shouldn't be the only person on the team in Orange County. And now there's 3 of us, because it takes me to join the team to then reach back and bring African-American analysts, Latinx analysts, and people of color who necessarily wouldn't have had the opportunity to join the firm. So hopefully that answers the question, you know.
Yes, absolutely. Ramraji?
Yes. So I've been with my organization 22 years, and in 2022, we started the first Black Affinity Network in California. And, you know, working for a large global bank, that's surprising, right? That we wouldn't have a Black Affinity group here, and it's great to be a part of that steering committee. But, you know, to Maurice's point, it's you know, I think it's important to have something to say. To the other panelists, you know, they mentioned, even if, you know, whatever we say, I think there's value. And, you know, it's important to be heard. And with that, you know, I think that alongside with having strong performance, there has to be a relatability about you as well. And, you know, again, alongside the other panelists, you know, community involvement, being philanthropic, understanding the things that matter to other people, so and defining what that means for you has helped in that regard.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just say that, you know, I think we've heard it from the prior panel and also here, that being, you know, a person of color or a woman or some, you know, non-minority or non-majority rather individual, you've navigated spaces so many times, and it's almost a superpower where you know how to fit in various spaces. That gives you a certain judgment, certain ability and intuition, and you should lean into that when you're in rooms in the corporate world. You know, you have something to say. And it's gonna take practice. You know, you might fall on your face or not be articulate the first few times that you try to get your point out, but you know, you do have something important to add and a different perspective and value, and you need to lean into that whenever you can. And that's one of the things you are. You may be alone or maybe an individual, but you do have something of value to add to that organization.
Perfection. So let's get into what this session is supposed to be about, actually. Means to means, creating wealth. The Mirage School truly understands how the lack of financial literacy threatens the prosperity of many Americans, but especially those within underserved communities. So, leaning into your expertise here, it is my understanding that historically underserved communities haven't really had the means, haven't had the seeds to really grow wealth. And that means we don't have the knowledge. We haven't had conversations around budgeting and financial planning and what it is to build wealth. So I'm going to direct the first question to you. Can you give us a breakdown of these key concepts? Like, what does it mean? What is financial literacy?
Sure. Well, for me, I think that financial literacy is just having the skill sets about financial matters. And how you develop those skill sets could be in many different ways. One is all of us attending this conference, reaching out to our resources and our networks to have dialogue and conversation. I loved hearing that there's, parents and kids here together. I think that's definitely something that we need to do more of in sharing what it means to build wealth within generations. And financial literacy is also, it could start by just reading publications on financial matters. It could be things like the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, Yahoo Finance, Google Finance, and these things may seem, tough reads if you're not a part of the industry, but maybe find things that you are interested in, industries that you're interested in, companies. And that's a way that you can start developing an idea on how to build your own knowledge when it comes to financial matters and how to incorporate that into your own lives.
Anything to add? Or we can jump right into the next question.
Sure.
Okay. Maurice, with technology, it's become easier to spend. Every time we're on apps, whether it is we just take an Uber or we're ordering Postmates. I know for me, over the pandemic, Postmates was my friend. Social media is constantly advertising to us. What are the ways that young adults, or all of us, even us adults, can manage and become more aware of our spending habits?
Yeah, for someone who's been in isolation the last couple of days, I've spent a lot of money on apps sending food. Just to piggyback on what Raji said earlier, I think that building wealth and having financial literacy, it's really a personal thing. Very much like organization or study habits. It's up to the person to decide what creating wealth means to them and how finances work for them to be successful. So I think having an awareness of how much you spend every month is critical. One of the key things that we speak to our clients about, and our clients are super successful already. And none of these folks, just to share some insight to what the uber wealthy people have accomplished, none of them have been successful overnight. Oftentimes it's boring, it's methodic and strategic, but it's the same thing over and over and over again. So to answer your question with regard to how to manage the apps and technology making spending money so easy, I think first it comes to having an awareness, paying yourself first. So if I know I get $2,000 a month, I'm going to give myself 10% to stack away first, and then I will kind of play with what I have later. I think it's having a budget. And some folks have budgets that are super detailed, others a little looser, but having one is important. And I think once you are aware of how much you want to spend and where you want to be, and you have a plan, it's so much easier to manage the DoorDashes and the Ubers and things of that sort. Okay. Because you ask yourself the question, do I really need this? Is this, do I really need to do this once you start to build good habits?
I would just add that technology has made it easier to spend, but it's also made it so much easier to track and save, right? There's so many apps out there, be it SoFi, Goal Center that we said earlier, Sigfig, Wealthfront, a bunch of ways for you to start almost in an entertaining way, watch your money grow, kind of gamify saving. And I think that's really important to start doing, as the other panelists have said.
Yeah, and to add, all banks, big banks, they have systems, technology embedded within the online banking system that can help with tracking and budgeting, or simply, working an Excel spreadsheet, or simply writing it down, whatever ways that you can. I think I like writing things out. You can see it and then have it be a roadmap for making decisions, to Maurice's point about your wants and your needs, and keeping you on track with that.
I'm the opposite. I love everything automated. Where I don't think about it, don't see it. I just, I get the net result after I've already paid myself first, as
Yeah.
Maurice said. And then what I know hits my account, I've already done all the other saving and everything else. So I know I'm kind of free and clear to act a fool.
I love it. So a lot of students here, and student loan and educational debt is a major concern for college students. When it comes to this loans and debt, are there ways to manage all of this and still feel like, oh, I'm coming up ahead a little bit at least?
Yeah.
I'm going to direct that to you.
So I went to business school and took out a massive amount of debt. And then in business school, I met my wife, who also had a massive amount of debt. So we graduated and married with a massive amount of debt. And we both wanted to be entrepreneurs, right? So the harsh reality is, once you kind of make these decisions, right, to take on this kind of debt, you're going to have to figure out that, a lot of us, unfortunately, don't have necessarily that safety net where we can take these risks right out of school, or or not, even if you have a great idea or whatever it may be. Sometimes you may have to defer a little bit. I know this is what people may want to hear, but you have to be responsible for certain decisions. So in my situation, I was like, I'll go work at Morgan Stanley, do investment banking for a few years, and then I'll go do my entrepreneurial thing. And my wife started her business, right? So here we are, almost 13 years later. I'm still at Morgan Stanley, still enjoying what I do. But those loans are finally paid off for both of us. Now, we're free and clear, but it did take some sacrifice, right? In my specific situation where, we had to face the fact that we've got to pay these bills, so.
So I have the fortune of my son, he's just finishing up his first year in college, and I started this continuous learning journey here at UCI. So I'm hit with 2 tuitions, which is, I never, who would have thought that would have happened, but it's all good. I'm a believer in good debt, right?
Yep.
And that's exactly what, investing in yourself is important to maximize your potential, and managing that, as there's so many programs and lenders that help you understand how to best manage and do the repayment of that debt. Yes, tons of discipline that comes along the way with that as well. You may have to put off the vacation a couple years, or maybe do shorter trips on a more local basis to fulfill that need. But I think that there's responsibilities, especially in my day. I will date myself. I would walk on Bruin Walk, and there'd be credit card companies with giving out free T-shirts and beach towels. And all you had to do was sign up for a credit card. And little did I know, I was started and out of sight, out of mind. You start buying, and next thing I knew, I was maxed out without a job. Hence the reason why my father told me to get a job. After I said, "Daddy," and he's like, "Your problem," But that was good. That was a good lesson to have, and it's a little different situation with my son now, and having him start off with understanding what his limits and his expenses are, in his first year of college. So that's my story. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just jump in really quickly. I think the panelists did a really good job of outlining a term that we use around here called delayed gratification. I have a daughter who's headed to college this fall, and I'm working with her so that she is not as crazy as me about free credit card T-shirts. And the one thing that I've shared with her is that, credit cards are for emergencies. There's a difference.
We lost you a little.
One second. One second.
Yep.
Okay, you guys didn't hear any of that. I apologize.
We're good.
That was very insightful what I just said to you.
We lost you at credit cards are for emergencies only. Yes, yeah.
So I have a daughter who's headed to college this fall. I've shared with her, credit cards are bad. We only want credit cards for emergencies. There's a difference between leverage and debt. To Ramraji's point of good debt versus bad debt. College loans, I'm willing to take a few out. Luckily, I saved a little money here and there to kind of help with that. But for those students in the room who are now incurring all of this debt and you're looking to interview for jobs and you're trying to figure out what you're going to do and how are you going to save, there's a way, and it's called delayed gratification. You can't be the first one on the BMW lot the day after graduation. Maybe you pay some of the loans down and then go get the big house and the BMW. So panelists did a pretty good job of outlining that.
Thank you. Let's stay with you, Maurice. Next question, investing. Most of us think of the stock market, Bitcoin or NFTs, which are all the rage now, I know. Some investments are riskier than others. Is there a helpful way to look at this? Can you give us like a 101 kind of tutorial?
Sure, I'll try my best here. I know I have good backup there in the audience, so if I start losing folks, y'all help me out, panelists. I think, at a very, very high level, investments is really trying to position yourself where your money works for you when you're not working. And whether that be in fixed income, bonds, or in equity, stocks in a company, or, cryptocurrency, I know is the new hot thing. I personally don't understand it, but whatever it is, if you can get your money to work for you, we call it passive income. It's a great thing. In order to get to that point, it's really about just doing it in my personal opinion. I went and opened up a Charles Schwab account at 21 years old, only because some guys in the office said, hey, we can open up a free Charles Schwab account. I happened to hear them. They didn't invite me to go join them, but after work, I went over there anyway and opened up an account. And I didn't know the first thing about stocks or, these weren't conversations that we had at our dinner table. We had conversations about how we're going to pay our bills at the dinner table. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to change that. I wanted to change that narrative. So to me, it's about opening up an account and then just investing in things that you're aware of, things that you know and like. I like Nikes. I like McDonald's. I like Pepsi, and so I invested in those things $15 at a time. And if the shares were $30, I remember Apple was $80 and I had to, buy one or two shares at a time, but it worked out over time. So I would say positioning yourself to have your money work for you is investing 101.
And just would add just to that again, with the advent of technology, it's so much easier now. You don't have to walk into a Charles Schwab like I did and Maurice did back in the day to open an account. And the fees now aren't, you're not gonna, buying one share of Nike isn't gonna, kill you because you're paying almost the same amount in fees, right? So there's a lot easier ways to do that now today as well.
And investment's not just limited to the stock market. It's limited. It has potential diversified across many industries: real estate, insurance. My son the other day was excited about his blooming Coachella NFT that, I had to do a little research and figure out what the big rage was. But I think that these Generation Z definitely are going to be more savvy when it comes to investing through technology. But still, going back to Maurice and Malik's point, is invest in something that you are passionate about, that you have interest in. And I think if you do so, you'll find yourself wanting to do more research. And then I think that will help broaden your opportunities to other things that you will come across with that research as well.
Thank you.
And I just want to jump in really quickly. I think it's important just amongst our community to start having these conversations about money and about investments and about, hey, what are you invested in? Or do you have, because the more you start having conversations, the more you learn and the more you may get an idea that creates some wealth for you and your family down the line. So I think it's important to openly talk about investments,
100%.
Maurice, you had mentioned 2 books. Side note, everyone. When we were on a call, and can you give us the names of those 2 books? You said they were really helpful.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the first book that I read was Millionaire Next Door by Thomas Stanley. Super good book, and it talks about basic concepts of wealth. And it really was an interview of hundreds of millionaires across the country and some of the things they did, like drive 1995 Ford pickup trucks for 20 years. So super good book if you're interested in starting down the path. And the other book was The Wealthy Barber. And I don't remember the author's name right now, but I'll look it up before we end this session.
Okay. I'd like to direct this last question to all of you. Jump right on in. But maybe start with Malik. Building wealth starts with a saving strategy. We've been talking about that. What should young adults be thinking about when it comes to really the building blocks? And we kind of touched on it, but I'd like, the tips and tricks.
Yeah. I mean, I think Maurice really hit it early on with saying pay yourself first. I think that's super important. And you also, because once you do that, you just kind of get excited about seeing your savings growing, right? And that's like a motivating factor to see, wow, like I'm actually building wealth. And then you start thinking about, all right, what other ways can I build that wealth, where you create routines? Like, okay, maybe on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I won't go to Starbucks, or I won't do certain other, things that I typically do without thinking about, right? And you're like, okay, that's even compounding my savings even more, am I investing even more? So I think it's just kind of building these habits that really start with paying yourself first, trying to do as much as you can on an automated or automatic basis where it's just routine. And then before you know it, you look up, you're like, wow, like I'm way more set than I thought I would be. So that's right.
And I like the concept of paying yourself first, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in your savings account. Paying yourself first can also be in your retirement account. Concepts of when you're with your employer, making sure you take advantage of opportunities of maximizing free money as a result of contributing into your own future. And there's just, again, so many tools that you can use that can help you, not just by talking to people such as ourselves, but also just going out and doing the research and being disciplined. I think building wealth takes discipline. And also, to Maurice's point, make sure that you're sharing that discipline with your future generations so that they can carry on that wealth legacy.
Yeah, there is an undeniable wealth gap here in the United States. And believe it or not, that gap is getting bigger and bigger. I think it starts with a personal conversation with oneself, an honest assessment. And you really have to ask yourself, where do I want to go? Where do I want to be? And then it's taking slow, methodical steps to get there. Wealth won't happen overnight for most of us. We have to work hard and be diligent. But I know for a fact, because I talk to people every day who've created tons of wealth by doing the same thing, over and over again. So we can all change that path, and we can change the narrative. It's really up to us to sit down first and have an assessment of where we want to go, and then take active steps to get there.
Perfection. Well, I'd like to open it up to the audience, and we have some hands up. We're going to take this nice young lady all the way at the end.
Thank you, panel, for the exceptional insight that you've shared with us today on wealth management. Along with the principles that you all laid out today, I know growing up, I come from a family of savers, right? That put that 10% away, pay yourself first. Credit cards are you only need one for that type of thing. But what I have seen as I got older is talk about ownership, right? Not only having your 9 to 5, but creating other streams of revenue to build on this wealth. And also, as Maurice mentioned a little bit, you touched on leveraging debt. Can you elaborate on some ways that maybe someone that wanted to accelerate wealth can leverage debt, whether it's credit cards or, yeah. Can you talk about that?
I have,
Sure.
yeah, you want to go, Maurice?
I'll jump in really quickly. I think one of the things that I see a lot of folks doing, leverage versus debt, you think about home ownership and the asset that a home is, especially with these rising prices. Clients are tapping into equity in their homes. And this is nothing new, right? People have been doing this for years. I think where I came from, people get a 30-year mortgage and you just try to pay it off as quickly as possible and you never touch it. Stay in grandmama's house so everybody have a house to go to. What my clients are doing, and I'm sure what other folks' clients are doing on the panel, they use leverage and they borrow against the house in a safe manner, and they go and get a duplex, or they go and leverage up and get an apartment. And now they have 2 or 3 assets with income coming in. Yeah, the debt service needs to make sense such that when folks don't pay the rent, your credit score isn't messed up. But I think there's ways to leverage the debt that you have into creating more assets, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we talked about using the equity in homes. I mean, I also think a way of leveraging debt, though, you have to build a portfolio first and then take advantage of, the interest rate environment that we're in right now and using, responsibly using your investment assets to leverage against so that you can invest in other opportunities. That's also another strategy that I'm on many of my clients. But again, it has to have it's a building block. You have to have assets to begin with in order to start maximizing those to build more.
And you touched on this briefly too. There's a lot of different assets, insurance, right? There's things to look at where you can potentially borrow against your policy after you build value in that policy. There's art, that you can borrow against if you are passionate about something like that. You find artists over time. You don't know what can happen with some of the art you collect, and you can leverage or borrow against that. There's a lot of firms that do that. Yes, exactly. NFTs. I don't understand that well enough to do it.
I don't either.
So yeah, but yeah, there's lots of different ways. I hope we address the question.
Yes.
We have another.
Okay.
Yes, hi. Thank you for you guys for the insight. My question was, saving money was the biggest thing growing up. That's what you hear all the time. But as I got older, it's all about investing your assets. Do you think that, especially at your level of income, that it is becoming more obsolete to just save money in your regular bank accounts that doesn't have a high interest rate rather than using a Roth IRA or insurance or et cetera? Do you guys prefer that we should only be taking more risk and investing in our assets rather than just saving money to the side? And then this also other question for Maurice in particular. You mentioned before, about you being a part of JP Morgan and you being the only Black executive. How did you, and that you wasn't as confident, what steps did you take or adjustments did you look at to be more confident, and then also being a part of bringing more Black people into the organization as well?
Yeah. So I'll take the back end of the question first, and then I'll let my panelists tackle the front end because I didn't hear it that much. But really quickly, I know we're short on time. The confidence piece of it. I think there's 2 ways I could have looked at it. I could have went to the room and looked around and said, man, no one looks like me. This is crazy. Let me just be quiet and be timid. And I thought, well, if I'm timid, it may not ever be another person like me in the room again. So let me speak up, be thoughtful, ask intelligent questions, and show my value. I'm here for a reason. So let me show them while I'm here, and brought my swag to the table, if you will. The first thing that I did when I arrived, though, even this was at 21 years old, I said, hey, I want to be a part of the Morehouse recruiting team. And at every stop that I'm at, hey, I want to be a part of the recruiting team at every school that we recruit at locally, because that gives me an opportunity to go and talk to students and give students who look like us a chance. Because otherwise, it's easy to look those people over because they don't have experience. They didn't do the internships at the big banks. So I'm like, you know what, I like this kid. I'm gonna give this kid the chance. And you have to position yourself to be in that situation, to be in the room asking the questions.
Yeah, on the first half of the question, so I think, I defer to my wealth management experts here, but I mean, it depends on where you are in life, right? Obviously, the younger you are, the more risk you should be looking to take with your money. Straight savings account giving you, 0.1% makes no sense, almost never, or in any stage in life. So I think you're right to look at other things like a Roth IRA, again, potential insurance policies, a lot of the stock market, obviously, fixed income, other maybe high yield instruments. There's a bunch of different things you can look at and do, I would think. But obviously, I would defer to my private wealth
I
management
think
colleagues.
savings is a good place to start. I think, though, as you alluded, the interest rate environment incredibly low. I think of keeping your money in a savings account as a little cash thief that's in your pocket because you're losing money with inflation. So then looking at other investment options that you feel comfortable with, and not putting all your eggs in one basket. There's strategies like dollar cost averaging, things of that nature that you can definitely figure out ways of still maximizing growth, and also one, again, being comfortable with volatility in the market, the highs and the lows, but then also maybe setting aside a savings account for that rainy day, that 6 months of emergency assets that you want to save aside, just to have buckets, and the buckets from a conservative to moderate to aggressive makes a lot of sense.